The galactic nexus pulsed with a hypnotic rhythm, its corridors glowing with the light of thousands of alien species technologies. Captain Elena Voss crouched in a shadowed alcove, her sharp eyes fixed on a patrol drone humming past. The glow of her stolen clearance badge was faint, but its flicker was enough to remind her of the risk she was taking. "Come on," she whispered, sliding the badge into the terminal slot. "Access denied." Her teeth clenched. 5 tries, 5 failures. If the Nexus's security grid flagged her badge as counterfeit, her mission, and perhaps her life, was over. She inhaled deeply, steadying herself. Behind her, the faint scuff of movement snapped her focus. Instinctively, her hand moved to the concealed plasma blade on her belt. "You're either very brave or very stupid, human." The voice, low and rasping, came from an insected figure emerging from the dim corridor. Towering over her, its exoskeleton shimmered faintly under the light. Its multifaceted eyes locked onto hers, unreadable. "Maybe both," Elena replied, standing slowly. "Who's asking?" "Crixer of the Xyloth." He tilted his head, a mandible clicking in what could have been amusement. "You're far from your section, aren't you?" "Far enough to be in trouble," Elena admitted, keeping her voice measured. Crixer clicked his mandibles again, this time in disapproval. "If they catch you, they'll do more than banish you. They'll dissect you for fun." "Noted. You going to help or just give me a head start?" He studied her for a long moment. "Depends. What's worth risking my exoskeleton for?" Elena hesitated but decided to gamble on honesty. "Evidence. Proof that humanity's ban wasn't just politics, it was sabotage." Crixer's antennae twitched. For a moment she thought he might alert the patrols, but then he gestured to the terminal. "Step aside." As she moved, Crixer produced a slender tool, inserting it into the terminal. The device hummed briefly, and the screen flickered. "Try now." Elena swiped the badge again. This time, the words, "Access granted," glowed on the screen. Relief swept over her, though she masked it. "Thanks." "Don't thank me yet," Crixer said, glancing down the corridor. "You're not the only one in danger now." Elena worked quickly, her fingers flying across the terminal as she accessed the Nexus's archives. The files were encrypted, but years of military training had taught her how to navigate such barriers. Within minutes, she found what she was looking for: the voting records for humanity's expulsion. Her heart sank as she scanned the data. The majority vote had come from Kalorn Ixus's coalition. That wasn't surprising, but the logs showed unauthorized alterations to the records before the final tally. Someone had rigged the system. "Got it," she murmured, downloading the files to a secure drive. "What did you find?" Crixer asked, leaning closer. "Proof that Kalorn manipulated the vote," Elena replied. "He wanted humanity out for reasons that have nothing to do with fairness." Before Crixer could respond, an alarm blared through the corridor. Red lights bathed the walls, and the terminal shut down abruptly. "They've found you," Crixer hissed. "No kidding," Elena said, pocketing the drive. "Got an exit plan?" Crixer motioned for her to follow. "This way." The two bolted down the corridor, their footsteps echoing against the metal floor. Behind them, the sound of approaching enforcers grew louder, heavy boots and the metallic whir of weapons being readied. "Faster," Crixer urged, leading her into a side passage. The walls here were rougher, unfinished, a stark contrast to the polished corridors of the Nexus. "Where are we going?" Elena panted. "A maintenance shaft. It's off the grid." They reached a narrow hatch. Crixer pried it open with surprising strength, revealing a dark tunnel. In. Elena climbed in without hesitation. The space was cramped, the air thick with the scent of machine oil. Crixer followed, sealing the hatch behind them. "Do you always help random fugitives?" Elena asked as they crawled forward. "Only the ones who interest me," Crixer replied. "Your kind has a knack for trouble, and survival. I admire that." "Flattering," she said dryly. The tunnel ended in a small, dimly lit chamber. Crixer pressed a hidden panel, and a concealed door slid open, revealing a labyrinthine sector of the Nexus that Elena had never seen before. The walls were lined with makeshift shelters, glowing with the light of alien technologies. "This is the Fringe," Crixer explained. "Where those the Coalition deems unworthy end up. Humans aren't the only ones they've stepped on." Elena scanned the area. Outcasts from dozens of species moved through the narrow streets, their gazes wary but curious. The air buzzed with a mix of languages, creating an undercurrent of tension. "What now?" she asked. "No," Crixer said. "You plan your next move. You've stirred the nest, human. It's only a matter of time before Kalorn tightens his grip." Elena's mind raced. The data on her drive was damning, but it wouldn't be enough. She needed allies, resources, and a way to expose Kalorn's treachery to the galaxy. Her gaze settled on Crixer. "You said you admire survival? Well, I'm not just trying to survive. I'm trying to change things, for humans, for everyone the Coalition's wrong." Crixer regarded her silently, then nodded. "You're bold. That might get you killed. But it might also get you what you want. Let's hope for the latter," Elena said, her voice steely. As the chamber door closed behind them, the alarm's echo faded, replaced by the hum of quiet determination. The fight for humanity's redemption was just beginning. The Fringe was alive with movement and sound, a chaotic symphony of alien voices and makeshift technologies. Dim, flickering lights cast shadows over the worn metal walkways, creating an air of unease. Captain Elena Voss followed Crixer through the winding paths, her senses sharp. Every step carried the weight of danger, but the murmur of voices hinted at something more, potential allies. "Where are we going?" Elena asked, her tone low but firm. "To someone who might help," Crixer replied without looking back. "If you can convince them." They stopped at a rusted hatch. Crixer knocked twice, then tapped a code into the panel beside it. The door groaned open, revealing a cramped room filled with an array of cobbled-together devices. In the center, a small, pale figure stood hunched over a console, its delicate hands darting across the controls with unnatural precision. "Elena Voss, meet Kaylee," Crixer said. "A gifted outcast with a knack for finding what others don't want found." Kaylee turned, her large, liquid black eyes locking onto Elena. Her small, bird-like frame seemed fragile, but there was a quiet intensity in her gaze. "A human," Kaylee murmured, her voice soft yet cutting. "Brave or foolish to be here?" "Maybe both." Elena offered a thin smile. "I hear that a lot." Kaylee tilted her head, studying Elena as though trying to unravel a puzzle. "What do you want?" "I need allies," Elena said plainly. "And information. The Coalition's vote to ban humans was rigged, and I have the proof. But exposing it won't be easy. I'm hoping you can help me dig deeper." Kaylee's fingers hovered over the console. "Digging comes at a cost. Especially when it risks drawing the Coalition's attention. What if that attention helps everyone here?" Elena countered. "You're all outcasts like humans now. But if we expose Kalorn's corruption, it could change the balance of power in the Nexus. Maybe even get justice for everyone he's wronged." Kaylee's gaze flicked to Crixer, who nodded slightly. After a long pause, she sighed. "I'll see what I can find. No promises." "Good enough for me," Elena said. Kaylee turned back to her console, her hands moving with a speed that was almost hypnotic. As the screen filled with cascading streams of data, Crixer leaned closer to Elena. "She'll help," he said quietly. "But don't expect loyalty." "Not yet." "I'm not," Elena replied, her voice equally low. "I just need the truth to get out. The rest will follow." Suddenly, Kaylee stiffened. Her head snapped up, and her black eyes widened. "They're coming," she whispered. "What?" Elena asked. "Coalition enforcers. A patrol just entered the Fringe. They're looking for you." Elena's stomach tightened. "How close?" Kaylee pointed to a monitor displaying grainy footage of armored figures moving through the crowded streets. "Too close," Crixer cursed under his breath. "They'll burn this sector to the ground to find you." Not if we're gone first, Elena said, her mind racing. Is there another way out? Kaylee hesitated, then motioned toward a back corridor. There's a hidden tunnel that leads to an old cargo dock. It's not secure, but it'll get you out of the fringe. Elena nodded. Let's move. Kaylee grabbed a small device from the console and followed them into the corridor. The tunnel was narrow, barely wide enough for Crixer's large frame, and the dim lights flickered ominously. Why are you coming with us? Elena asked Kaylee as they hurried through the passage. Kaylee glanced at her, clutching the device tightly. Because if you fail, we all lose. And because I hate K'Lorn as much as you do. Elena accepted the answer, though she could hear the uncertainty in Kaylee's voice. Trust was still a fragile thread between them. As they neared the end of the tunnel, the faint hum of the Enforcer's weapons echoed behind them. Elena's pulse quickened. They're faster than I thought, Crixer muttered. Kaylee stopped abruptly, holding up the device. Keep going. I'll slow them down. Elena frowned. How? Kaylee activated the device, and a holographic interface sprang to life. By scrambling their scanners. It won't last long, but it'll buy you a few minutes. That's suicide, Elena said, stepping closer. Not if I'm good at what I do, Kaylee replied, a ghost of a smile crossing her lips. Now go. Elena hesitated, torn between leaving Kaylee behind and risking capture by staying. But Crixer grabbed her arm. She knows what she's doing. Don't waste her effort. Reluctantly, Elena nodded. Be careful. Kaylee's smile widened, though her eyes remained somber. You too. Elena and Crixer pushed forward, emerging into the cargo dock. The area was abandoned, its vast expanse filled with rusting containers and dormant machinery. Where now? Elena asked, scanning the space. Crixer pointed to a small freighter tucked into the shadows. That's our ticket out. As they moved toward the ship, the sound of approaching footsteps sent a chill down Elena's spine. She spun around to see 3 enforcers entering the dock, their weapons trained on her. Stop right there! One of them barked. Elena raised her hands slowly, her mind racing. We're unarmed. Doesn't matter, the enforcer replied coldly. You're coming with us. Crixer growled low in his throat, stepping protectively in front of Elena. Over my dead body. The enforcers didn't hesitate. They opened fire, forcing Elena and Crixer to dive for cover behind a stack of crates. Plasma bolts scorched the air, illuminating the dim dock in bursts of blue light. We can't fight them head-on, Elena said, glancing at Crixer. Then we outsmart them, he replied, gripping a metal pipe he'd grabbed from the ground. Elena spotted a control panel near the far wall. If I can reach that panel, I can activate the loading drones. They might give us enough of a distraction to escape. You better move fast, Crixer said, lunging out of cover to draw the enforcer's fire. Elena darted toward the panel, her heart pounding as plasma bolts streaked past her. Reaching the console, she activated the drones, which roared to life with a mechanical whir. The massive machines lumbered forward, their movements causing the enforcers to scatter. Now! Elena shouted, sprinting toward the freighter. Crixer followed, leaping aboard just as the ship's engines roared to life. Elena slammed the hatch shut, and they launched into the air, leaving the chaos of the dock behind. As the freighter ascended, Elena allowed herself a moment to breathe. The data was safe, and they'd escaped, for now. But the fight was far from over. Next step? Crixer asked, his voice steady despite the tension. Elena looked out at the stars, determination hardening her expression. We find more allies. And we make sure K'Lorn pays. The freighter shuddered as it entered hyperspace, its worn engines groaning with the effort. Elena Voss slumped into a chair in the cockpit, running a hand through her hair. The adrenaline from their escape still buzzed through her veins, but she forced herself to focus. There was no room for exhaustion, not yet. Crixer stood nearby, his massive frame casting a shadow over the controls. Where to now? He asked, his voice steady but tinged with urgency. Elena tapped a few keys on the console, bringing up a holographic map of the sector. There's a satellite hub 2 systems over, she said. It's old, barely used, but still connected to the Nexus's relay network. If we can broadcast the data from there. Crixer grunted. And alert every enforcer in the quadrant while we're at it? It's a risk, Elena admitted. But the longer we sit on this information, the more chance Kaloran has to bury it. A faint noise drew their attention. Kaylee stepped into the cockpit, her small frame almost lost in the doorway. She looked tired but triumphant, clutching the device she had used to scramble the enforcer's scanners. I bought us time, she said, her voice calm. But they'll track this ship soon enough. You need to act fast. Elena nodded. We're heading for a relay hub. Once the data's out, they can't silence it. Kaylee's expression was unreadable, but her dark eyes flicked to the console. You're betting everything on the hope that people will care. They will, Elena said firmly. Once they see the truth, they'll have to act. Kaloran's corruption affects more than just humans. It's tearing apart the foundation of the Nexus. And if they don't care? Kaylee asked. Elena hesitated but then stood, her voice steady. Then we make them care. One way or another. The tension in the room hung heavy, but neither Crixer nor Kaylee argued. The plan was set. The freighter dropped out of hyperspace near the satellite hub, its engines rumbling as Elena guided it into position. The hub was a derelict structure, its surface pockmarked from years of neglect. Faint lights flickered along its edges, a sign that it still held a trace of power. This place looks like it'll fall apart if we breathe too hard, Crixer muttered, peering out the viewport. Let's hope it holds together long enough, Elena replied. She keyed the comms. Docking sequence initiated. The ship shuddered as it connected with the hub. Elena grabbed the data drive and stood. Kaylee, I'll need you to interface with the hub's systems. Crixer, stay with the ship and keep the engines warm. If things go south, we need a fast exit. You don't have to tell me twice, Crixer said, gripping his plasma rifle. Kaylee nodded, following Elena into the airlock. The corridor leading into the hub was dimly lit, its walls covered in peeling paint and exposed wiring. The air was stale, carrying a faint metallic tang. This place gives me the creeps, Kaylee muttered. Just focus on the job, Elena said, her voice steady. They reached the control room, a small chamber filled with outdated equipment. Kaylee immediately set to work, her nimble fingers moving across the console with practiced precision. This system's a relic, she said, her tone a mix of annoyance and admiration. But it'll do the job. Elena inserted the data drive into a port. The screen lit up, displaying the files she had stolen from the Nexus archives. Kaylee began decrypting the remaining layers of security, her concentration unshakable. Once this uploads, it'll be everywhere, Kaylee said. The Nexus, the Fringe, even private channels. Kaloran won't be able to stop it. Elena nodded. Good. Let's make it count. As Kaylee worked, a sudden noise echoed through the hub. A low, metallic clang that sent a chill down Elena's spine. Did you hear that? Kaylee whispered, her hands pausing over the console. Elena drew her plasma blade, her eyes scanning the room. Stay focused. I'll check it out. She moved cautiously toward the source of the noise, her blade glowing faintly in the dim light. The sound grew louder, a rhythmic thud, like boots on metal. Enforcers. Elena cursed under her breath and tapped her comm. Crixer, we've got company. I see them. Crixer's voice crackled back. They've got a gunship docked on the far side. Looks like they're sweeping the hub. Hold them off as long as you can, Elena said, her grip tightening on her blade. Already on it, Crixer growled. The sound of plasma fire erupted from the comm, followed by Crixer's guttural roar. Elena forced herself to stay calm, returning to the control room. They're here, she told Kaylee. How much longer? 2 minutes, Kaylee said, her voice strained. Maybe less if you stop talking. Elena smirked despite the tension. Fair enough. The door to the control room slammed open, and 2 enforcers burst in, their weapons raised. Elena didn't hesitate. She lunged forward, her blade slicing through the first enforcer's weapon before driving into his chest. The second enforcer fired, the plasma bolt grazing Elena's shoulder. She gritted her teeth against the pain and swung her blade in a wide arc, forcing him to retreat. Kaylee didn't look up, her focus unbroken. "I'm almost there." Elena pressed her attack, dodging another shot and disarming the second enforcer with a well-placed kick. She finished him with a swift strike, breathing heavily as his body crumbled to the floor. "Done!" Kaylee exclaimed, her voice triumphant. "The data's uploading!" Elena's relief was short-lived. The room shook violently, and the lights flickered. "They're trying to disable the hub," Kaylee said, panic creeping into her voice. Elena tapped her calm. "Crixer status?" "They've got explosives on the outer structure," Crixer replied, his voice strained. "We've got maybe a minute before this place is space dust." Elena grabbed Kaylee's arm. "We're done here. Move!" The two sprinted back toward the ship, the walls trembling as explosions echoed through the hub. They reached the airlock just as a section of the corridor collapsed behind them, sending debris flying. "Go, go, go!" Crixer shouted from the cockpit as they stumbled aboard. Elena slammed the hatch shut, and the freighter launched into space, narrowly avoiding the final explosion that consumed the hub. As the ship stabilized, Elena collapsed into a chair, her chest heaving. "Is the upload complete?" Kaylee nodded, a faint smile on her face. "Every file. It's out there now." Elena closed her eyes, a wave of exhaustion washing over her. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to feel hope. "It's not over," Crixer said, his voice steady. "No," Elena agreed, opening her eyes. "But it's a start. And now, the galaxy knows the truth." As the freighter disappeared into the stars, the data they had risked everything for spread across the networks, a spark igniting the flames of rebellion.